Welcome to Love Thy Lawyer, where we talk to attorneys about their lives and careers. I'm Louis Goodman. Today, James Cook joins me. James is an attorney at the John Burris law firm, emphasizing police excessive force cases. He has extensive experience in pretrial civil litigation, trial prep, and jury trials. He's interned at the San Francisco Public Defender's Office and the Tenderloin Housing Clinic. James is a member of the Earl Warren Inns of Court, the Charles Houston Bar Association, and the Alameda County Bar Association, amongst other professional organizations. He has numerous professional awards. But one cannot know James without recognizing that he is a Golden Gloves boxing champion and Thai kickboxing champion. James Cook, welcome to Love Thy Lawyer.
Hey there. All right. Good to see you.
Where are you talking to us from right now?
I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is my hometown.
And do you spend time there and in California?
I kind of straddle both states, California and Minnesota. So I go back and forth. I have kids here. So yeah. So I do go back and forth.
Are you licensed in Minnesota as well?
No, not yet, but I'm working on it.
What kind of practice do you have?
Like you said, I work for law offices John Burris in California. You know, it's Bay Area, all over California, basically. And people might know, I mean, locally in California, they know him for the police cases, but we do a lot of different things, you know, including employment and amongst other things. But most people know Mr. Burris for the Rodney King case in 1992, way before I was even thinking about becoming a lawyer. But he did the Rodney King case, and then more recently, you know, the Oscar Grant case. And if you're really local, the writers were, you know, there was a gang of cops in Oakland, and you know, got a negotiated settlement agreement. And so, you know, these days, so yeah, so we do a lot of those high profile cases are the ones that the firm is actually known for. So, but we do a lot of other things besides that. And I like to say that we are, more just civil litigators, federal court, and do a lot of cases in federal court.
How long have you been with Burris firm?
I mean, I've been with Burris for a long time. I mean, way before I even became a lawyer, you know, and you know, I was still, before I even went to law school, once I finished law school, then, you know, I did a little stint with, like you said, with the San Francisco Public Defenders, just real short, and then ended up with Burris.
Where are you from originally?
From Minneapolis, Minnesota. Was where I grew up.
Is that where you went to high school?
I went to high school. I went to Southwest. Shout out to Southwest High School. Lived and grew up in Southwest Minneapolis. If you're listening to this and you know, so my family, I grew up kind of near Lake Calhoun, on the sort of southwest end of Lake Calhoun.
What sort of things did you do in high school?
I mean, to be honest, I just had a unique experience. Like, I guess at the time, because we were one of the few black families in that part of town, and really, you know, at the time, Minnesota it's still pretty homogenous. I was a punk rock kid, so I was in the, you know, punk rock, speed metal, like that type of thing, you know, and a skateboarder, big into sports. I wasn't good at any sports, but I loved, like, I played soccer. I mean, I ended up swimming in college, and, you know, tried to be on the soccer team and that kind of thing. But the soccer team was so good, everybody went to the Olympics and played the World Cup. So I was good for an American, but I was not on that level.
So where did you go to college after you graduated from high school?
I went to Howard University. It's a historically black college. It's where our current vice president went. So, you know, people made a big mistake about that. But yeah, I went to Howard.
Well, that must have been a huge difference going from Minneapolis to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're asking the question because you know that most people don't know, because when they go to D.C., they go to the federal enclave, but it is a primarily black city, you know, run by black folks, you know, other than the federal enclave, right? But yeah, it is. So yeah, it's a big culture shock. It was a good thing. I mean, I knew that when I was finishing high school that I was definitely going to go to historically black college, right? You know, after having grown up, you know, and gone to school and kind of always felt like I was being judged more along racial lines. And, there was either going to go to Morehouse, which is in Atlanta, or Howard. But, if you know about those colleges, Morehouse is a all boys college with Spelman, the women's college across the street. But I didn't want that. I wanted to go to Howard, co-ed.
Yeah, you were looking for the co-educational experience.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Well, when you graduated from Howard, where did you go to school after that?
I took a circuitous route. Like, I didn't go to law school right away. I was pre-law, but I didn't go right away. One thing that I ended up doing a sport that was kind of coming up. It was kickboxing, but it's Muay Thai kickboxing. And it's where, no pads, knees, elbows, that type of thing. And if you've ever been to Thailand and you've been to the stadiums, you know that this is the sport country. So I was pretty good and ended up being really good at it. And, so I finished college and I turned pro kind of shortly after that. But I'd been coming up as an amateur. And then right around that time was, they were trying to they've been forever trying to bring it into the Olympics at that point. And then, so I was on the US team that they attempted to do for 96. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to Atlanta and meet Michael Jordan, that type of thing. So I traveled basically around the world, just competing and go to other countries. So like most of my competitions were overseas in like Europe. And then shortly thereafter, I actually got sponsored by I was a writer, and that was kind of how I supported myself, and a tech guy, and I turned pro, and that was, at the time you couldn't make a lot of money. You could do it pretty good. And then once I started getting on the marquees, I could, but it's not like you make a living, not like now. And so I was a writer. I was writing for magazines. If you remember Vibe, and like Spin was a big magazine back then. And I even wrote some for Rolling Stones, and like did some, I don't know, like Village Voice on all the papers, like for instance, the weeklies in Minnesota. And I wrote for them.
Were you writing about kickboxing or music?
No, I was writing about music. I was actually writing a lot about music, like black alternative music, like black rock and roll at the time, which was, like Living Colour all of a sudden hit the scene, and like Fishbone and like sort of that. But also I was a book reviewer. Like that was my thing, is I did a lot of book reviews. And I remember distinctly, like when we, for 96, 95, we were traveling all around. And so before I went, like the editor gave me like a big, huge bucket of books that I took with me on the plane, and I was reading, and then filing like a report, as I read these books. But yeah, so that was where I really hit my stride as a book reviewer and music, somewhat music reviewer, like alternative scene. And then I got into graduate school at Boulder. It was like a MFA type program, like a writing, like English program. And then said, man, I got a scholarship for it. And I knew the first day I started, like, not something I wanted to do, but, I'd finish it and then, start to apply for law school.
So how long were you at Colorado University in the MFA program?
It was an MA program. Like, it was like, I think they turned it into an MFA. I don't know if it was while I was there. So I don't have an MFA, I have a master's, but it was 2.5 years. And honestly, most of the time that I was there, I was training, I was competing, probably like, it seemed like every other graduate student was like on some, high level sports team, mostly skiing and like snowboard, you know what I mean? And snowboarding and all, sports like that, like anything you could think of. So I was, I was in class, like doing my assignments, but I was really competing like a lot. So.
Well, that must have been a big culture shock too, coming from Howard and to Boulder. Yeah. I mean, that's like pretty different type schools and pretty different demographics.
Yeah. Different demographics. So Howard is like I said, a historically black college and very academic based and like not a lot of sports and that type of thing. And really people are like very studious and really about like in the education. Went to Boulder, and even though I was a graduate student, and I actually lived in the graduate dorm for a bit, but for the most part, though, the school was a party school, and I'd never seen something like that before, because they go to a party school, and it really, literally, it was like a winter camp. I mean, you had a lot of people, of course, like, a lot of people, just a lot of skiing, like recreational. Of course, you had the competitors, but really, like, most of it was like, hey, we're here to party. And I think at the time, even, it was like, it was like, I remember there was a report in U.S. News World Report that it was like the #1 party school, and like the CU Boulder football team, like that was big deal. And it was just, it was party on. I mean, I didn't really engage in it because, I was there, I was competing, being, drug tested, but it was definitely a party school.
After you got your master's, did you take some time off between getting the master's and going to law school, or did you go directly to law school?
No, I took a long time off. Like, I was 24, 25, I was competing. I was on the circuit, and I was fighting a lot. Like, it was a couple of years I was fighting like every 2 weeks. And if you know anything about Muay Thai, it's pretty brutal. But yeah, I was fighting a lot, and that was what I was doing. I'd be on a plane, every other week, like going to someplace, over the Atlantic, or, to Japan or China or something like that to go compete.
I imagine you met some rather interesting people in all that traveling and training and fighting.
I fought on a show that was on ESPN, and I met a guy named Alex Gahn, and he was the owner of Fairtex. And Fairtex is a big gear company in the fight, in our little tiny universe of fighting and combat sports. So I ended up getting sponsored by him, and that they were located in San Francisco, like right on 5th and Howard. And, they have a camp, and you train with your stable of fighters. So I ended up getting sponsored by them, and I went out there, but I was also a tech guy. And, the first time I went out there and saw the camp, and, it's kind of like, yeah, we fight, train. And then the guys that don't have fights are just partying like nonstop. I ended up getting a tech job, and this is the first wave of tech. So I got this really high paying job in Silicon Valley and Sunnyvale. And I'd drive up there, and I'd be training twice a day. Like, I'd literally have to drive up to San Francisco 5 a.m. and then train, then come back, boom, and then, then work all day, and then go back up there for the second training session. So there was a lot of that. I also trained at AKA, which became a big one. And then kind of towards the end of my career, like I would say into the early 2000s, around 9/11 or so, a little bit after, the big thing became cage fighting. If you ever seen the UFC, or if you ever heard of it, and that became a bigger thing, and where you can make more money. Now, I was still boxing. Like, I'd actually boxed on some pro shows, like Coliseum, Shark Tank, like the big Oscar De La Hoya's promotion, Golden Boy promotion. I fought on those a few times, like done the actual boxing, but really my sport was Muay Thai. But then when that came along, you could actually make a living as a fighter. And unfortunately, I was on my way out, but, so I did cage fighting for a little bit as I retired, which is a little bit easier, because if you ever watch it, there's a lot of stalling, and they fight on the ground and that type of thing. And then San Francisco, in the Bay Area, started to produce like a lot of high level, like very famous people. And then finally it was like, I had a fight in Vegas, and I got TKO'd. It was time for me to stop. And that's when I finally got serious about law school. Went to Golden Gate.
When did you first start thinking about being a lawyer? When did that occur to you that maybe somewhere along the line, I want to go to law school someday?
When I was going to college, I was pre-law in college. I specifically went to college to become a lawyer. It's just that I got sidetracked with the writing, just because, I think I got the scholarship because, look, I was a token black guy. Like, they really wanted a black guy. And I think the head of the department had seen some of my writing, like, it was like, I was writing about the culture at the time. Prince had just changed his name to a symbol. There was a lot of crazy things happening in music. And of course, we in Minnesota thought that Minneapolis was the original place that grunge came from, and produced like the sound that ultimately became known as Soundgarden and Nirvana. We think that we're the ones who started that. And people might say that, but Seattle and Portland improved on it. Right. And so there was a lot going on, at that time with that type of rock and roll music, like rock and even to a certain extent, like with hip hop and that type of thing. And I was writing about that. So that's how I got picked up in the program and got the scholarship. And, I think they definitely wanted like some black folks in the pro because they probably hadn't, I don't think they had any for a long time. So yeah.
So what then prompted you to actually apply to law school? To really like say,
I didn't want to be an academic. Like I just, once I started, I was like, wow, it was not, I knew right away, like, this is not what I want to do as a career. You don't make any money, the whole thing, like everybody talking about like, oh, I got to get tenure, like, cause in my program, like we became the instructors. Like I had to actually teach classes and come up with a curriculum. And, I remember my first day, like I'm 23, 24 and I'm teaching in graduate school and there's people that are older than me. And I remember walking to the front of the class, like the very first day. And it was like, people were like, I wonder who the instructor's going to be. It's still, I remember the look on their face when I was like, hey, everybody, I'm James Cook. I'm your instructor. People like, look at each other like, really?
So what did your friends and family say when you finally decided, hey, I'm going to law school, and you really went to Golden Gate, right?
Yeah, my dad really didn't want me to. He's a business guy. He had a business and he kind of hated lawyers. My mom was, she liked that. She did not like the fact, she didn't really understand the extent to which I was competing. I think she kind of had an idea, but not really. She never ever saw me fight on. It wouldn't have been good for her to see that because it's, every fight, like there's blood and it's brutal and you're getting hit with elbows. And I had my ribs broken a whole bunch of times, stuff like that. So, but she didn't like it that I was engaged in that activity other than something that's an academic pursuit.
Do you think that the fighting experience has helped you in terms of being a litigator?
Well, I'll say this is, when you're doing combat sports and really any sport, like I think that, kids should play it because there's a couple things that happen. One, you get used to competition, right? And you get used to preparing for competitions. And like, at least this is the way I see it, right? My own personal thing. So you get used to that and like, in most of the time you're failing, right? And a lot of people don't go through that experience where they, it's like skateboarding, you see kids like practicing skateboarding, they rarely make the trick. They got to fail and fail and fail and fail until you finally make it. And then you learn how to, and then you make it once and then you fail a whole bunch more times and then you start making it multiple times and you become consistent. They all became professionals and they always say, yeah, our training, nothing will ever be as hard as our training. And then, there's that. Just prepare for a competition. Like, they go into trial or a hearing that's high stakes or something like that. You know how to deal with it, right? Stay calm and don't freak out.
So you've done a lot of things. You've been a professional athlete. You've been a college level teacher. You've been a writer. You've had all kinds of opportunities. Yet you decided to go to law school. You became a lawyer. You are a lawyer. You've litigated a lot of things. You work for a very good firm. What is it about being a lawyer that you like and that keeps you practicing?
I definitely like the competitive aspect, I got to say. I mean, it fits in with my personality. I think, not everybody, should, or not everybody wants to when they go to law school, become a litigator and, like be subject to deadlines and extemporaneous speaking at hearings. And you probably feel like you get overwhelmed, and especially if you got a lot of cases.
What would you say to a young person who is thinking about law as a career choice?
I think you got to intern and see what it's really like, because a lot of people's perception, including mine, is based on law and order. I think that critical thinking aspect is really important. And I like that. But let's see, that's what I would say to the young lawyer. That's what you're going to get out of law school. But the practice of law school is not like TV. And it's not like you probably think it is.
What about the business of practicing law? You work in a competitive industry, and you're not working for the government. You're not working for a nonprofit. You work in a business, and there's certainly a social justice component to it. But I'm wondering how that business has worked out for you and what your observation about that is.
First thing that Mr. Burris ever said is, to me when I, interviewed with him, and it was hard to get a hold of him at the time, and how I got Burris is a sports fan, and he owned a baseball team at one time. But I was fighting at the Coliseum, and I tried like a bunch of times to get a hold of him, and then finally I called the office and said, "Hey, I'm fighting at the Coliseum. I'll give Mr. Burris. I'll leave a couple of tickets at the desk." And then I got a call right away. So sportsman. So about the business, I mean, and then when I interviewed with him, he's like, it's really strange to have a guy who's, in like a prize fighter wanting to go to law school. Like, you even have brain cells, like that. He's asking me, but he was serious about it. And finally was just kind of like, well, look, this is a business. Yeah, we try to do good, but really this is a business. And that's how you got to think of it. It's important to network and, be out there and be out there in the public.
Is there anything that you know now that you really wished you knew before you started practicing law?
The whole thing about the writing and the critical thinking, and also like it's more than just practicing. Like there's a lot of social work. You are a social worker, and just how to like really client management. I think especially for us, because people have so high expectations because they're thinking that we're Rodney King people, and everyone thinks, hey, my case is Rodney King or Oscar Grant. So managing clients' expectations. I tend to be more really super blunt and to the point, which sometimes works, but not always. Like I spent a lot of time really managing clients. Like I do a whole thing called client education.
What do you think's the best advice you've ever received?
That, like what Mr. Burr said, like you're in business, like you're more of a business guy. And I think that they should have like business for lawyers, like just practical stuff for people, because I think there's
in law school
a lot of lawyers. Yeah, in law school.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of lawyers, they sell themselves short. And there's people out there who do it well, but it doesn't come naturally. And also just like I like this whole thing of wellness and just telling lawyers like you don't have to always try to drum up some type of conflict with the other side to get it done. In fact, it doesn't always work.
Do you think the legal system is fair?
No. I don't. I mean, we have to tell our clients all the time, it's not fair. When you have to tell people, while your case is really good, you're black, most of the people on the jury are going to be white and older. And even, especially if we're in the Eastern District, they don't see life the same way that you do.
What mistakes do you think lawyers make?
Not explaining those things to their client in the very beginning and setting their expectations. Like that's at least in terms of what we do, that's a huge mistake, because it's a domino effect that causes a lot of problems down the line, and not explaining to them like the nuance, like that all lawyers think about things, at least in terms of litigation, like what would a jury say? What does it make with the jury? And how do we, like the nuance of the law, like you can't, and I think that's a mistake that a lot of lawyers make, like not articulating that and explaining that to people as they bring them along through the process.
What sort of things keep you up at night?
Deadlines, possibly missing deadlines. My daughters are growing up faster than I thought.
Let's say you came into some real money, let's say $3 or $4 billion. What, if anything, would you do differently in your life?
I actually like what I do. Like, I don't even see it as work. To me, it's not. So I'd continue doing it. I mean, I don't billions of dollars. I don't even know. Like I'd probably, I buy a lot of property. Like I got a farm in northern Wisconsin and a ski house up in Upper Peninsula, Michigan. I'd probably buy more acreage, and do a lot more farming. Like I'd be able to buy more equipment. I mean, I have some, but you know what I mean? Like I'd probably do some developments.
Let's say someone gave you 60 seconds on the Super Bowl, a Super Bowl ad. What would you want to put out there to that huge national audience?
You've got to somehow make the jury system appealing to people, and you got to serve on juries. I mean, that is one way to sort of make policy. We need marginalized minorities to feel like they are part of the process, and you got to, vote, be on the jury, try to own your homes, like take an ownership stake in your neighborhood, like Oakland, San Francisco, the Bay Area, Milwaukee, like where there's these large pockets of marginalized people. I mean, and it's not just black and brown people, but just generally like for everyone, so that, like there's just a different way, like to help with the drug addiction and the mental health, like all of those things, so that we didn't have such, crazy like blight and like we have now,
Like step up and be a citizen.
Step up and be a citizen and know that there's just a different way. Now, albeit, we can't resolve all the issues, but, mental health, funding, and all that kind of stuff has to do with it. So
if someone wants to get in touch with you, ask you a question, consider retaining your firm, retaining you, what is the best way for somebody to get in touch with James Cook?
bncllaw.com or Law Offices of John Burris. So JohnBurrisLaw.com.
So if we do a Google search for John Burris Law Office, we'll come up with a website and we can find James Cook there.
Yeah, you can also do a Google search for James Cook, ESQ. I have a YouTube page with a bunch of interviews that I did and some TV stuff that I did a while ago. So yeah, you can find me there as well. James Cook ESQ on YouTube.
All right. James, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't discussed, that we haven't touched on?
No, unless you have other further questions, I think we touched on a lot. I hope I don't know, gave some people some insight in terms of how my circuitous route to becoming a lawyer.
Well, I think all of us have a route to becoming a lawyer, and different people get there different ways. Certainly your route was very interesting, and I do hope people will take a look at some of your YouTube presentations, because I've seen them, and it's very, very interesting stuff. So thank you for joining me today on the Love Thy Lawyer podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Hey, thanks a lot.
That's it for today's episode of Love Thy Lawyer. If you enjoyed listening, please share it with a friend and follow the podcast. If you have comments or suggestions, send me an email. Take a look at our website at lovethlawyer.com, where you can find all of our episodes, transcripts, photographs, and information. Thanks to my guests, and to Joel Katz for music, Brian Matheson for technical support, Paul Roberts for social media, and Tracy Harvey. I'm Louis Goodman.
Like, we would get knocked out. You drop your hands, boom. It'd be like one of those Minnesota, 99 degrees, 90% humidity. You can't even stay warm in the air. And we're going hard and literally getting, jaws broken, that type of thing.